Imagine your precious modern heater stubbornly decides to stop working for a mere 3 hours, and suddenly your cozy, Wi-Fi-enabled home feels like a tragically failed civilization. Now, aggressively strip away that heater, the sturdy walls, the local grocery store, your trusty weather app, and literally every single thread of synthetic fabric you currently own. Next, mercilessly lower the temperature until the very act of breathing actually hurts your lungs. That, my friends, was a typical Tuesday winter for ancient humans. And here is the exceptionally strange part. We were absolutely not built for it. Humans clumsily began their earthly journey as warm climate primates possessing painfully exposed skin, remarkably modest body hair, and an utterly alarming tendency to lose precious body heat like a terribly insulated, drafty apartment. Yet, inexplicably, our stubbornly ambitious ancestors pushed deep into hostile landscapes where mighty rivers froze solid, sensible animals migrated far away, edible plants completely disappeared, and a single, careless night could easily turn an entire family into fascinating archaeology. So, how on earth did they survive brutal winters that, biologically speaking, should have comfortably killed them off? It was certainly not achieved with one singular miracle invention, nor with some legendary heroic toughness, and most definitely not by just casually getting used to it. No, they miraculously survived by cleverly building a protective second body outside the fragile body itself. Fire, clothing, shelter, complex food systems, and, crucially, other people. In a very real sense, winter forcefully created technology and perhaps even society itself. The very first problem our ancient, shivering ancestors had to solve was brutally, unapologetically simple. The fragile human body is simply not a winter animal. A majestic woolly mammoth arrived on the frosty scene with a luxurious, built-in sleeping bag of dense fat and hair. Wise reindeer proudly carried magnificently thick fur, compact bodies, and highly specialized blood vessels brilliantly adapted to conserve precious heat. Meanwhile, humans confidently showed up with awkwardly long limbs, completely exposed skin, and the delusional self-assurance of someone who had boldly neglected to read the weather forecast. Cold relentlessly attacks the body through the cold equations of physics, not theatrical drama. Thermal heat naturally flows from warm, sweating skin directly into the much colder surrounding air. A biting wind swiftly strips away the micro-thin layer of protective warmth hovering just above the body. Wear wet clothing, or indeed wet anything, and the perilous situation deteriorates exponentially faster, simply because water deviously conducts heat away from you far more rapidly than dry air does. Once the body's core temperature falls, its muscles stiffen up, cognitive judgment rapidly deteriorates, and ridiculously simple tasks become strangely, impossibly difficult. Insidious hypothermia does not merely make you feel painfully cold. It deviously makes you incredibly bad at saving your own life. So, long before humans could successfully survive severe, unforgiving winters, several distinct abilities absolutely had to exist at the exact same time. The most glaringly obvious of these was, of course, fire. Controlled fire generously offered comforting warmth, flickering light, reliable protection from lurking predators, and a revolutionary way to cook raw food. Cooking mattered immensely because brutally cold environments demand absolutely enormous amounts of metabolic energy. Your hardworking body furiously burns through calories simply to remain basic-level warm, which means winter survival is, at its heart, partly a thermodynamic fuel problem. Consequently, ancient humans desperately needed heavy food that was exceptionally dense in rich fat and hearty protein, and cooking magically made many of these tough foods far easier to chew, digest, and subsequently share. But a cozy fire is only truly useful if you possess the relentless discipline to keep it alive. That difficult chore requires diligently collecting dry fuel long before the temperature drops, carefully protecting fragile embers from howling wind and damp moisture, shrewdly recognizing which materials burn slowly and well, and democratically deciding who gets to stay awake on watch duty while everyone else peacefully sleeps. A campfire, therefore, was not just a glorious discovery. It was a rigorous, non-negotiable schedule. Then, thankfully, came the invention of shelter. Even a laughably simple windbreak could reduce dangerous heat loss quite dramatically. Natural caves, sturdy rock overhangs, animal hide-covered wooden frames, and very carefully chosen campsites all helped to snugly trap precious warmth and block the biting winter winds. Remarkably, even freezing snow itself could eventually become excellent insulation because tightly compressed snow contains tiny pockets of trapped air, which is, honestly, deeply unfair. Winter tries its absolute best to kill you, and then, in a bizarre twist, one of its very own main ingredients suddenly becomes your primary construction material. Clothing quickly created yet another vital protective layer. Rugged animal hides could effectively block the freezing wind, while thick fur trapped a cozy layer of insulating air comfortably close to the bare skin. Primitive scrapers helped painstakingly remove unwanted tissue from these raw hides, while sharp awls or pointed bone tools could easily pierce them. Much later, the introduction of fitted clothing and the delicate art of sewing made this protection far more incredibly efficient, because while loose, draped hides are certainly useful, properly tailored sleeves are the very definition of civilization. Absolutely none of this worked, however, without meticulous, long-term planning. Winter, as a rule, punishes lazy procrastination with an unusual, almost sadistic enthusiasm. Food had to be systematically gathered, fresh meat carefully preserved, dry fuel stored away, hunting tools meticulously repaired, and sturdy shelters thoroughly prepared long before conditions became outright dangerous. Most importantly, humans absolutely had to cooperate. One dedicated person could gather heavy firewood while another diligently processed animal hides. Highly skilled hunters could feed vulnerable children, injured adults, and elders. Valuable knowledge could then pass smoothly from highly experienced, battle-scarred survivors to the understandably clueless younger members of the group. Our clever ancestors did not simply evolve thicker, fluffier coats of fur. Instead, they brilliantly evolved the art of teamwork. After all, nobody woke up one particularly chilly morning, yawned, and confidently announced to the cave, "Today, we shall officially invent winter survival." Most of these life-saving strategies probably began as small, highly embarrassing accidents repeated often enough to eventually be classified as genuine knowledge. For instance, a sudden lightning strike obligingly burns down a portion of the landscape. The terrifying flames eventually retreat, but the scorched ground remains delightfully warm. Naturally, animals killed or thoroughly injured by the blaze are suddenly much easier to chew and digest. Someone eventually notices that cooked meat is significantly softer, richer, and, best of all, far less likely to actively fight back. Behold, useful evolutionary discovery number 1. Early humans may have first desperately learned to preserve and pamper natural fire long before they became consistently skilled at actually producing it from scratch. A glowing branch, a delicate bed of hot embers, or smoldering plant material had to be carefully carried between temporary camps. That sounds wonderfully simple, until you remember that their most valuable, life-saving piece of technology was literally, actively trying to die out all day long. Animal hides probably followed a remarkably similar accidental path. Hungry hunters were already removing smelly skins just to access the delicious meat and fat beneath. A fresh, slightly damp hide placed over shivering shoulders blocked the biting wind. A fur-covered hide worked even better. Eventually, someone bravely slept on one and discovered they lost far less precious body heat to the frozen ground. Before you knew it, a thoroughly disgusting piece of decaying animal carcass became cozy bedding, fashionable clothing, a draft-excluding door, and possibly humanity's very first attempt at rustic interior decoration. The exact same trial-and-error process applied to shelter. A shivering group resting behind a fallen tree or a sturdy rock face would feel the wonderful difference immediately when the freezing wind shifted. Helpful branches could extend that temporary barrier. Heavy hides could cover drafty openings. Massive bones could support structural frames in barren landscapes where large, sturdy pieces of wood were desperately scarce. Each individual improvement was probably quite modest, but winter survival is built entirely from such modest, incremental improvements that successfully prevent one final, fatal mistake. Food provided another fascinating set of discoveries. In bitterly cold regions, lean meat alone could actually be dangerous because the human body desperately needed fat to survive. Fat contains far more concentrated energy than protein or carbohydrates, making rich marrow, squishy brains, and fatty tissues extremely valuable. Cracking open a long, stubborn bone was not a sign of primitive, uncouth table manners. It was high-level nutritional engineering. Food preservation may also have organically emerged through lazy observation. Meat left out in the cold, dry air spoiled much more slowly. Thin strips dried near smoky heat lasted impressively longer. Frozen food could be safely stored way beyond the day of the initial kill. Although keeping greedy scavengers away remained a demanding, full-time, unpaid customer service issue, even the annoying snow taught valuable lessons. It obligingly revealed animal tracks, migration routes, and the terrifyingly recent presence of hungry predators. It could be melted for drinking water, packed tightly against structures, or used to seal up annoying gaps where the wind entered. The harsh environment was not merely a mortal enemy. It was a highly interactive instruction manual written in the bloody ink of consequences. The humans who survived were not necessarily the strongest, most muscular specimens. They were simply the observant ones who noticed repeating patterns, remembered past outcomes, and generously shared what worked. One heavy hide was infinitely warmer than none. One sturdy wall was vastly better than the open, howling wind. One glowing ember could buy them another precious, warm night. Accidents gradually became daily habits. Habits solidified into tradition. And tradition eventually became the brilliant, unyielding technology that winter simply could not freeze. Now, archaeology dramatically enters our story, carrying a very official clipboard, and immediately ruins everyone's favorite romantic certainty. The physical evidence stubbornly refuses to preserve a complete, neatly packed winter survival kit. Fur tragically decays, wood rots away, delicate plant fibers vanish, and snow shelters melt with an almost suspicious cover-up efficiency. Only stubborn stone, bone, teeth, charcoal, and occasionally frozen materials manage to survive, which means we are currently reconstructing an entire prehistoric technological system from the ancient equivalent of someone's forgotten toolbox, a messy fireplace, and leftover dinner trash. Still, the surviving clues are absolutely remarkable. At Happisburgh on the eastern coast of England, clever archaeologists found stone tools and clear evidence of human occupation dating back more than 780, with a mind-boggling string of zeros in years. The landscape was located near the southern edge of the boreal zone, featuring significantly colder winters and shorter winter days than the delightfully warm, sun-drenched environments our early ancestors originally evolved in. Later on, fossil footprints discovered there revealed that a cozy small group, including busy adults and younger individuals, had casually walked across wet sediment roughly 850 thus to 950,000 years ago. They left absolutely no coats behind. Quite rude, really. Their chilly presence definitely proves that early humans reached surprisingly northern environments. It does not prove, however, exactly how they managed to survive them. To the great disappointment of fashion historians, archaeologists have not yet recovered a neat, fossilized Happisburgh wardrobe conveniently labeled winter collection. Instead, controlled fire, protective clothing, sturdy shelter, seasonal migration, and fleeting periods of temporary occupation all remain highly plausible possibilities. Much clearer, less mysterious evidence appears in significantly later periods. Ancient hearths containing charcoal, burned bone, ash, and heat-altered sediment show that both clever Neanderthals and modern humans repeatedly and masterfully controlled fire at many sites. The deliberate arrangement of these hearths can also reveal exactly how living space was organized. Fire was sometimes carefully placed where annoying smoke could easily escape or where cozy warmth could efficiently reach occupied areas, suggesting that camps were thoughtfully planned rather than randomly assembled by messy people dropping things in dark caves. Handy hide-working tools add another intriguing layer. Heavy stone scrapers carry microscopic where perfectly consistent with processing tough animal skins. Sharp bones could pierce leather, allowing hides to be joined together before eyed needles even appeared. At Caners in Spain, researchers identified a nearly 40,000-year-old bone fragment repeatedly punctured in a pattern consistent with leather working. It may well have served as a handy punchboard while someone pierced hides with a pointed tool. In other words, prehistoric tailoring may have cleverly begun before the needle had an eye. Bone needles later became especially important because they allowed much finer, more controlled stitching. They appeared in various parts of Eurasia during the Upper Paleolithic. Although their exact dates vary quite a bit by region, these elegant needles strongly suggest the arrival of fitted garments, cozy layered clothing, and eventually, stylish decoration. At some vain point in history, humans stopped asking only, "Will this keep me alive?" and began asking, "Does this luxurious fur make me look powerful?" Shelters also leave indirect signatures: rings of stones, post holes, concentrated debris, patterned hearths, and massive, rather dramatic arrangements of mammoth bones on the windy Eastern European plains. Some of these colossal structures may have supported heavy hide coverings or marked substantial camps used in extremely cold landscapes. No single, miraculous artifact explains winter survival. Together, however, they reveal something far better: an entire technological system preserved one stubborn, dusty fragment at a time. This is where our story becomes slightly less satisfying and much more scientific. We know ancient humans survived freezing environments. We do not know exactly when every single survival technique appeared, who actually invented it, or whether different populations solved the same problem independently. Prehistory, unfortunately, does not come with patent records. Take clothing. Animal skins almost certainly appeared long before sophisticated tailored garments, but organic skins rarely survive for hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeologists therefore must rely on indirect, detective-like evidence such as hide scrapers, awls, needles, and even the fascinating evolutionary history of parasitic clothing lice. These clues suggest that clothing is indeed ancient, but they do not provide a single, specific birthday for the winter coat. There is also a lively debate over what Neanderthals actually wore. Some researchers argue that they probably used relatively simple capes or loosely wrapped hides because hide needles are much more strongly associated with later modern human populations. Others quickly point out that Neanderthals possessed sophisticated stone tools, processed hides, used bone implements, and successfully survived repeated glacial conditions. A clever species capable of hunting large animals at close range could probably understand the basic concept of closing a draft. The disagreement is not about whether Neanderthals used animal skins. They almost certainly did. The harder and infinitely more contentious question is whether they meticulously produced snug, tailor-fitted, multi-layered clothing comparable to the rather fancy winter wardrobes of later Upper Paleolithic humans. Fire, of course, sparks another heated debate among scholars. Simply finding some charred, crispy material at an ancient archaeological site does not automatically prove that those early humans were master pyrotechnicians who actively created or controlled the flames. Wildfires happen quite rudely and randomly. Sediments shift around over millennia. Wind-blown charcoal can easily crash an archaeological party quite naturally without any human invitation. To confidently identify habitual, intentional fire use, meticulous researchers must hunt for unmistakable clues. Repeatedly used stone hearths, thick concentrations of cozy ash, heat-fractured stones, charred animal bones, and clear spatial patterns showing that combustion occurred precisely where people actually lived and gossiped. Even then, sheer frequency matters immensely. Strangely, some early northern campsites contain surprisingly little convincing evidence of fire. That could mean fire was not used with any reliable consistency. It could also mean the delicate evidence was utterly destroyed by time, or, quite sensibly, it could mean these clever humans only visited during the milder, highly pleasant seasons and swiftly packed their bags before the winter weather became outright homicidal. Seasonal migration may well have been just as crucial as sheer, stubborn endurance. Ancient groups did not always stubbornly remain in the exact same frozen spot, foolishly attempting to heroically tolerate every single apocalyptic blizzard. Instead, they sensibly followed migrating herds, retreated toward cozy, sheltered valleys, descended to warmer, lower elevations, or strategically shifted between coastal and inland resources. Quite frankly, sometimes the absolute smartest winter technology available was simply walking south. There are also highly competitive, academic explanations for why anatomically modern humans eventually occupied these extreme, teeth-chattering cold environments far more extensively than their earlier hominin cousins. superior sewing skills, advanced projectile weapons, clever food storage techniques, wider, gossip-filled social networks, and far more specialized, wind-resistant shelters may all have handily contributed. Intriguing biological differences may have played a significant role, too. Neanderthals possessed compact, impressively muscular bodies beautifully designed to conserve precious body heat, while modern humans may have cleverly compensated for their scrawnier frames with highly flexible technology and vastly larger social exchange networks. But, as usual, archaeology rarely hands out one clean, undisputed trophy to a single winner. The brutally honest answer is that winter survival evolved as a dynamically shifting package of adaptable behaviors, wildly different across various places and chilly periods. Some prehistoric groups possessed excellent fire control but wore embarrassingly simple, drafty clothing. Others flaunted highly sophisticated, tailored garments but suffered from severely limited firewood. Some stubbornly stayed put through the brutal winter. Others wisely and rapidly disappeared long before the first snowflake fell. This persistent uncertainty is not a frustrating flaw in our historical narrative. Rather, it is the quiet, haunting footprint left by absolutely everything that did not manage to survive. Once the art of winter survival finally became reasonably reliable, it stopped being just a chaotic collection of desperate emergency tricks and successfully transformed into a structured economy. Organizing a successful cold-season camp required absolutely impeccable timing. Savvy hunters had to predict precisely when herds would migrate, exactly where beasts would cross rushing rivers, and which deep valleys offered the best protection from biting winds. To these people, a mammoth, bison, wild horse, or reindeer was not simply a hot dinner. It was a magnificent jackpot of meat, rich fat, nutritious marrow, thick hide, sturdy sinew, durable bone, potential fuel, handy tools, warm bedding, fashionable clothing, and more than enough raw material to make a modern warehouse manager weep with deep, overwhelming emotion. However, these incredibly large kills also created a rather delicious problem: overwhelming abundance. A single colossal animal could provide vastly more food than a modest, small group could possibly eat before it spoiled. This happy dilemma strongly encouraged the clever arts of drying, smoking, freezing, and careful, highly political distribution. Meat could be carefully cut into paper-thin strips. Rich fat could be meticulously rendered or stored away. Heavy bones could be enthusiastically broken for delicious marrow, while spongy bone was intensively processed for valuable grease. During a brutal winter, high calories were certainly not an optional lifestyle choice. They were vital survival infrastructure. Managing fuel required similarly intense, forward-thinking planning. In densely wooded regions, busy people gathered fallen branches and dry deadwood. Meanwhile, out on the vast open steppe, where trees were notoriously scarce, dry bones may sometimes have desperately but cleverly supplemented other sparse fuels. A hungry hearth had to be fed continuously, which meant some poor soul had to collect flammable material long before the terrifying darkness set in. Howling bad weather or sheer physical exhaustion made this chore incredibly dangerous. These constant, unforgiving pressures naturally encouraged a degree of job specialization, although probably not in the rigidly bureaucratic way later civilizations organized their labor. The most highly experienced, sharp-eyed trackers might lead the dangerous hunts. Others diligently processed heavy carcasses, carefully repaired stone tools, tirelessly scraped smelly hides, gathered precious fuel, nervously watched energetic children, tenderly cared for nasty injuries, or dutifully maintained the precious fire. Every single mundane task mattered immensely, because just one neglected detail could catastrophically affect the survival of the entire group. Winter also dramatically expanded the vital value of cooperative social networks. Family completely devoid of provisions could miraculously survive through the simple act of sharing. A remarkably skilled toolmaker could swiftly replace a catastrophically broken spear point. Another neighboring band might generously share their secret knowledge regarding the precise location of migrating herds, high-quality tool-grade stone, or a beautifully sheltered route winding through the unforgiving landscape. These early alliances functioned as a highly effective, primitive form of insurance, existing long before some bureaucratic genius invented paperwork and then, quite spectacularly, managed to make the entire concept of insurance infinitely worse. Warm, shared meals almost certainly reinforced these fragile social relationships. Gathered closely around a flickering fire, food transformed into something far grander than mere biological nutrition. It magically spun a web of mutual obligations, deep trust, lasting memories, and hard-earned social status. Naturally, the heroic hunter who triumphantly brought back a massive slab of meat gained immense prestige, but collective survival depended just as desperately on the unsung heroes who meticulously preserved it, fairly divided it, and sleepily made sure the precious fire did not quietly expire at 3 o'clock in the freezing morning. Captivating stories probably mattered immensely, too. Vital, life-saving knowledge about dangerously erratic weather, unpredictable animal behavior, safe river crossings, and catastrophic past disasters could be remembered far more easily when artfully shaped into an engaging narrative. After all, a dire warning wrapped in a highly memorable, dramatic story travels much farther and faster than a dry, tedious lecture. Modern humans still instinctively know this profound truth, which is precisely why absolutely nobody willingly gathers around a cozy, crackling campfire to hear a dry, soul-crushing quarterly survival report. Elaborate ritual may have significantly strengthened social cooperation as well. Solemn burials, vibrant earth pigments, delicate ornaments, repeatedly visited gathering places, and intriguing symbolic objects strongly suggest that Ice Age communities deliberately built deeply shared cultural identities. During the brutally hardest season, a profound sense of belief and belonging may have miraculously helped turn fiercely separate, selfish individuals into a cohesive group genuinely willing to sacrifice for one another. By then, the terrifying winter was no longer defeated merely by a single clever person possessing an exceptionally warm coat. Instead, it was triumphantly survived by an entire, interconnected society. Today, our modern winter survival looks decidedly less dramatic simply because thousands of years of painstakingly accumulated knowledge are quietly hiding inside our most ordinary, mundane objects. A fashionable winter coat is merely highly portable insulation. A cozy house is essentially a glorified windbreak equipped with convenient plumbing. A kitchen refrigerator is just highly controlled, localized cold. A well-stocked pantry represents carefully delayed hunger. And central heating is, in truth, nothing more than a wild campfire that somehow went to college, learned advanced engineering, and became far too sophisticated and polite to throw glowing sparks onto your expensive living room carpet. Yet, the deeper, ancient pattern of human behavior has not changed in the slightest. Whenever the outside temperatures precipitously fall, we fragile humans still instinctively gather together. We enthusiastically share delicious food. We anxiously check on our distant relatives. We frantically stock up on unnecessary supplies. And, of course, we bitterly complain about the freezing weather with the absolute, utter seriousness of people who feel personally and maliciously betrayed by the Earth's atmosphere. It is no historical accident that our major holidays cluster so densely around the darkest, bleakest seasons, because winter has always made physical warmth, glowing light, and cheerful company feel infinitely more valuable. Our modern, high-tech survival systems may superficially appear entirely individualistic. You can easily buy your own insulated coat, smugly adjust your own digital thermostat, and effortlessly order food online without ever speaking a single word to another living human being. Yet, absolutely none of those modern conveniences are truly solitary achievements. Your cozy warmth still utterly depends on an invisible army of miners, builders, farmers, truck drivers, specialized engineers, factory workers, humming power grids, maintained roads, and countless past generations of clever people who slowly learned how to efficiently store energy and reliably move vital resources through frozen, hostile landscapes. The ancient, fundamental lesson remains beautifully intact. Human survival is, and always has been, a distributed effort. Our hardy ancestors did not magically conquer the brutal winter by suddenly becoming biologically immune to its icy touch. They remained painfully, fragilely vulnerable. A solitary person could still easily freeze to death. A neglected fire could still catastrophically fail. A difficult hunt could still stubbornly produce absolutely nothing. What miraculously changed was their brilliant ability to combine these partial, imperfect protections into one highly flexible, unified system. Roaring fire compensated beautifully for our pathetic, naked skin. Thick clothing compensated wonderfully for our long-lost evolutionary fur. Clever food storage compensated for bleak, empty winter landscapes. And warm, willing cooperation compensated for almost everything else. That, quite possibly, may be the single most important human adaptation of all. We possess the unique ability to build sophisticated solutions entirely outside our fragile bodies and permanently preserve them inside our shared culture. One pioneering generation discovers a useful trick, and the very next generation diligently improves upon it. Eventually, absolutely nobody remembers the brilliant, nameless individual who first stitched a clumsy sleeve or desperately protected a glowing ember through a long, freezing night. But every single one of us gratefully inherits the miraculous result. So, when your modern heater suddenly breaks down and your living room becomes even mildly uncomfortable, your rising panic is not entirely ridiculous or dramatic. Somewhere deep beneath that digital thermostat, a primal, ancient alarm is still loudly ringing in your genetic memory. Cold, after all, once directly meant rapidly shrinking food supplies, terrifyingly dangerous darkness, and the very real, grim possibility that the morning sun would ultimately arrive without you. Fortunately for us, you are comfortably surrounded by the highly sophisticated, cozy descendants of those brilliant prehistoric answers. Walls, insulating fabric, cleverly hoarded food, shared wisdom, and, ideally, some responsible soul who actually knows where the extra blankets are stashed. Ancient humans survived brutal winters that absolutely should have killed them because they accomplished something no fancy fur coat could ever do alone. They quite literally became one another's warm shelter.